Hi everyone, this is Lex from Gentry Collectables, and I thought today I'd go over a little bit on bottles. Tips and tricks, how to evaluate them, what people look for, some history, some relevant history on a few of them, things like this. First though, I did have a few questions on the Facebook messages, and I wanted to address some of those. One of the questions was, I see items in your videos that aren't listed in your shop. Why? Like, basically, where are those items? Are they ever for sale? Probably they're wondering if they're part of my or William's personal collection. They aren't. They are items that we source for our patrons. Very often, one of the services we offer is, for a fee, depending on the item and how many pieces you're looking for and how many years you're looking for them and having us try to source or procure them for you, you can give us objects or lists of objects that you're looking to find. And then for a very small fee, usually less than the cost of, an auction house's take, we will try to source those items for you at the lowest possible of course we can find them at. And then we add on that small percentage, kind of our finder's fee, which really isn't very much. And then what you get basically is, now that we've purchased the item, you get to buy it first. We don't make it public. We don't make it publicly available. So when you're looking for specific pieces that might be very valuable to you or to your collection, or things that you just want really badly that get snapped off the market really quick, working with procurers like us and paying a small service fee can sometimes be the way to make sure that you get them so that it doesn't go into, say, the Dead Gentry shop where anybody could buy it. So a lot of the time, if you're looking at flowware that you might see in the background, or specific teacups that you might see in the background that never appear in the shop for sale, it's very likely that we've sourced that for a patron. And if you want us to do the same thing for you, of course, email us. You can contact us. You can contact us on Facebook. You can contact us, I think, on YouTube, and certainly through the Etsy shop. And we are more than happy to disclose all the details around that sort of thing for you. So that was one of the questions. We enjoy these items, so we like putting them in the videos, but very often they're already taken. They've been specifically purchased for someone who's requested them. Another question I had to do with, whether or not we do more videos on jewelry, specifically on pearls, like how to tell real pearls, of course. And now that you've requested it, I will definitely make it a priority to do a whole video on just pearls, faux versus authentic, Morimoto pearls, different gauges of pearl bead sizes, all those things to look for, things to teach you about how to evaluate them, what they're worth, which ones you should be buying if you love pearls and you're buying them. I will definitely go over a video for that. And I just wanted to point it out. They took the time to write an email saying, will you do a video on this? We love that. We love when you guys interact with us. So if you write us an email and make a video suggestion, if I know about those objects and I can in any way be informative to you, I am more than happy to make that video next. So today, though, because we already had all the glass out before I read the messages this morning, I'm going to go over some glass bottle stuff. Now, oddly enough, glass bottles, vintage and antique, can be worth quite a bit of money if you know what you're looking for. And of course, as a collector, if you collect glass bottles, that they increase in value over decades. So it's if you're looking to get into collecting something because you enjoy it, because you want it, and because you're looking towards the future, what might my collection that I'm taking the time to buy now at retail prices be worth 40 years from now? Glass bottles are one of those wonderful things that can be well worth that effort. I think I'll start back here. See if I can show you this a little closer up. Of course, all of these are very breakable, so I'm going to be very careful today. This is called a dairy bottle. Now, a lot of people are going to know that, but a lot of younger people may not. See how it says 1 pint there? And this is a slightly older one. See this? Now, things to look at. How do I know it's older? Well, I happen to know because I know who both bottles were made by, which you would They're all different brands depending on the state, depending on the county. See how the tops are a little bit different? That's one of the ways you can identify age, and you can identify, of course, if you have a catalog of items. Smaller piece back here. I just want to show you a few of them before I get into too many specifics. One of the things about dairy bottles, whether you're collecting, again, over a lifetime, maybe hoping to increase value over years, or whether you're reselling and searching these products out. I love this little, look how tiny, he's so small. See if I can show you in relation to my hand there. See that? This little Eagle brand one. This is probably condensed milk. People held on to these quite a bit, especially the smaller ones. They're so charming because they would often give them to children to use to play with their dolls when they were empty, or tea time and that sort of thing. And of course, these you could cork, so you could happily reuse them. Dairy bottles, very heavy glass, very thick, very difficult to break, right? They'd be delivered to your door in a little metal crate, like 6 bottles every morning. So it was important that they be very industrial. Now, one of the things that means is, although they are collectible and although some of them are worth money, it also means they don't break very often. So their rarity rarely increases, which kind of keeps their value a little bit on the lower end of collectible glass bottles. So that's something to think of. Also, where did it come from? If you're looking at a dairy bottle, or even say a large dairy metal canister from a dairy that was used to collect milk on a farm, another wonderful antique vintage item, it's going to be worth more if it's from the area where it's being sold. So say you have a dairy bottle from a company that produced in Pennsylvania, near a Pennsylvania creamery or a Pennsylvania farm, and you know that farm, you know that maker, maybe it's even branded onto the bottle and pressed in the glass, that bottle is going to be worth more in Pennsylvania than, say, in Florida. You see how that kind of works? People are more likely to want to pay more in the area where the antique history of the item, especially when it comes to dairy goods, where it was sourced from, where it originally was made, created, and then used. So one of the things that plays into the evaluation of something like dairy bottles, larger sizes worth more. Now this usually applies to all bottles across the field. So here's and again, it's not always the case, right? There's always some times when I won't say a small Roman olive oil glass bottle or an Egyptian cosmetic bottle that's only 2 inches is not worth more than, say, something made in the 1940s, of course, very often. Yes, and you can come across those pieces. It happens. So I'm not going to say it's a rule no matter what, but generally, when dealing with vintage and antique glass bottles, larger increases the value. A larger bottle tends to be worth a little bit more. When you look at bottles, one of the ways you can date them is by looking at their bottoms. So when you're looking at the bottom of a bottle, this is a machine-made bottle. See the seam here? Actually, this seam doesn't cross the lip, which I hadn't noticed before even picking it up. See, it's one of those many things you got to run your fingers around. Your fingers will always know more about an object than your eyes. But when you look at the bottom of any bottle, not just dairy, you're looking for something very often called a pontil mark. And there are different types of pontil marks. And sometimes people will mistake it for, oh, it's damaged, or oh, it's broken, because it'll look like cracks or sharp edges or just some obscuring in the glass at the base, kind of like a broken bubble. That's not damage. Very often that's a pontil mark. So pontil marks, there's a few different types of them. I'm kind of wondering where I should even start with a lot of this. When you're looking at industrial glass bottles, a lot of the time on the bottom, you might see an actual hallmark or a maker's mark. Like I inside a diamond is an industrial brand, and inside a square, the famous B and Co. A, B connected to each other, where those two initials are joined. They're actually connected inside of the stamp. A B inside of a circle is another industrial brand. So those are things where if you can actually find an impressed hallmark, of course, research that. That's going to help you evaluate an object. That can very much help to tell you when it was made, what it was made for, what it was used for, and how desirable it might be in the future. But not everything has a Pontil mark. So you have to kind of think a little bit, if it doesn't have a Pontil mark, what does that mean? Does that mean it was made, it was formed very, very old, which is rare, or maybe machine made, maybe not, handmade with a Pontil iron? So dairy bottles, let me just give you some quick over-the-top prices here. Not over the top, not too highly evaluated, but off the top of my head. Medium-sized bottles such as this would be a medium size. They actually come quite a bit larger than this. You're looking at, $5 to $8. Again, as I said, a lot of people hold on to them. They don't break very often. 1930s to 1950s is when this would have been made. Same thing here, $8 to $10, 1930s to 1950s. Bigger ones, you could maybe get $10 to $12. Smaller ones, a little bit less. You can tell what they are by their shape. When it comes to dairy, that's how you're going to know. Blue bottles. So here we have some blue bottles. When you're dealing with colored glass, which is one of the things to look for, colored glass very often is used for apothecary type goods would have been held in them, or perhaps perfumery goods. And that's because the colored glass actually stops direct UV radiation. It stops what's inside the bottle from decomposing at a faster rate very often. So the color of the glass is dark to protect the liquids inside. And colored bottles, very desirable, generally more desirable than clear bottles. So, blue bottles, a very large blue bottle, depending on the year, $15 to $20. Again, if it's an antique or if it's a highly desirable vintage piece, probably more than that. Sometimes you'll see maybe like a bottle with a bent neck where it's not broken, but where the neck of the bottle itself is actually like curved like this. Those are vintage pieces. They're not malformed. They're not mistakes. Very often those would have been used by doctors or nurses through the mid 1900s, really, or earlier 1900s, sometimes 1850, to, if you're saying giving cough syrup to a patient that can't lift their head easily. So a lot of those older glass pieces were actually formed for their use. So don't think if you see a bent neck bottle that it's worthless. It absolutely isn't. That can be a very collectible item. Medicine marks on a bottle will often tell you, it says there's no color, like this, right? This isn't blue. This doesn't have that blue that screams that it had some sort of apothecary or perfume or something in it. It's clear. But do you see these marks right here? These are medicine bottle marks. These are actually denoting the volume or dosage that would have been used inside of a piece like this. These tend to be more desirable. People like things, apothecary bottles, especially older apothecary bottles. And when they have a mark like that, because it not only does it help identify the age, but it helps identify the use. And very often when people are collecting, they're collecting based on what the use of the bottle would have been. So if you see medicine marks on a bottle, generally a good sign. Also, here's something else to think about. I could show you this on all three of these, I believe. See that square? I don't know if you can see that. See that square on that one? This one's got the triangle instead of the square. Let's see if you can make that out. It's right here, kind of where I'm running my finger. So they're square, they're triangle. Here you've got that initial in a circle, which is very common to a lot of the more industrial bottles. It's kind of hard to see on there. It's got a little bit of sediment. So, but that's what I wanted to talk about a little bit. If you look at the bottoms, do you see that curve in the bottoms of these? See how this glass kind of curves down here at the base? You could also, if you were running your finger, you'd feel that kind of indentation, that curve there. You can see it when you look head on. See again that raise in the glass, that curve to stop the settling of sediments inside of different medicinal or apothecary use vintage bottles. So that's something you can look for. Does it have that curve? Then it's more likely to be something where they were aware of, we don't want the sediment to settle all the way across the bottom, and therefore it was used in a drug, what we call a drugstore today. It would probably held a form of poison or a form of medicine, of cough syrup, of a tonic of some kind. You'll see that a lot. This little bottle here actually is a hair tonic bottle. Now with this one, it's very easy because if you were looking at a piece like this, you could look this up and you're going to find very quickly that it's a 1940s Kreml hair tonic bottle, which again, desirable, fun, wonderful addition to a collection. It has this amazingly a small raised and only it's like a half screw. It's like a partial non-screw here for when you would dab it on your fingers, right, to then rub into your scalp, which you don't see very often in a lot of these. So that's very interesting. I mean, it's when you get lucky and you have a name like that right on a piece, that's going to be very helpful. You're not going to need my help figuring out, what that's worth or what it was used for and therefore what it might be worth. But you don't always have that. I will say staining on bottles decreases value. But here is something to know. Staining and residue are not the same thing. If you have a bottle, very often, I think we sold a bottle lot not that long ago of medicinal vintage bottles, where a lot of them had that beautiful iridescent residue of their original chemicals kind of in the bottle, and you could see the reflective, like that oil skin on a puddle, or that rainbow effect of iridescence left over from chemical residues. People actually like that. Sometimes people will pay more for that. So don't assume that you should always wash everything you come into contact with. Don't wash and rinse these. That residue actually makes that bottle more desirable. But that type of a residue is different from staining. If a bottle is stained because someone decided to put, I don't know, some sort of oil into it later and reuse it, or grease, or any kind of dye that may have stained the bottle in an undesirable way, that's going to reduce the value. So there are two types of color leftovers sometimes in glass, right? Residue from the original contents, good. Staining, whether from the original contents or contents later put into the vessel, not good, reduces value. Cork top bottles are easy to tell because, like this, for instance, show you the difference here, right? This is a cork top. This is a screw top, right? So when you see these demarcations for where a lid screws on, newer, worth a little bit less. Older cork tops where cork would have been used straight into here, and therefore none of those striations, right? None of the glass mold screw to turn a cap on with. Older, worth a little bit more, generally. But again, depends on the type of bottle. So it's not always easy to talk about these things. Like you can say in general, dairy bottles, medium size, $5 to $8 if they're from the 1930s to the 1950s. Fair enough. Larger ones, maybe $10 to $12. But there are things that can change that evaluation. Is it in great condition? Are you selling it in the same state right next to the dairy farm that created it in 1937? That could increase the value. Does it have some strange sort of specialty mark or figure on it? That could increase the value. People look for things like that. So I can give you general ideas of what you're dealing with, but when it comes to actually figuring out what a piece in your collection might be worth or whether or not you want to add a piece to your collection, there are some finer details that you really need to think about. There are figural bottles going all the way back to the 1900s. If they're screw top, like you'll see these like Mrs. Butterworth in a brown bottle, and it's a figural. It's glass, not plastic, but it's that figure form inside the glass is molded to look like Mrs. Butterworth, but it's a screw top, that's actually not worth very much because it's a screw top. You'll see the same thing with liquor bottles very often. People will collect these older liquor bottles. A lot of them aren't actually worth very much. Again, it depends how many were made, how many are still around, how desirable is it. When it comes to glass, a lot of this has to do with, cork top, no seams at all in the glass. No seams is always worth more. One seam worth a little less. Lots of seams in the glass, and by seams we mean these. Let me show you here. By seams we mean this right here. See this? That's a seam from when the bottle was made. And this one wasn't made by an AB machine because, as you see, the seam doesn't come all the way over the lip here. You can feel it with your finger, that this ridge doesn't climb this lip. And I'll explain that in a minute. But that's a seam. No seams, more valuable. One seam, okay, a little less, but still valuable. Multiple seams, not worth as much. That's kind of one of those general rules that you can apply when looking for things. I'm trying to think of things when people are trying to decide whether to make that next highest bid at the auction, right? Like when I watch my patrons try to source their own items, like what's a rule, a quick and fast rule I can apply here to see whether or not it's worth spending that extra 15 or that extra 20. No screw tops, try to avoid it. Unless you're into screw tops, but fewer seams is better. Staining is bad. Bigger size tends to be better. What the object was used for. So liquor, not usually as desirable as, say, a poison bottle from 1920 that says poison on it, or an apothecary bottle like this one that has those drug demarcations on it. Those tend to be more desirable than, say, a similar piece that would have been used to hold liquor. People are just more interested in having them, in collecting them, and in displaying them. Doctors, pharmacists, people who might have had a doctor or pharmacist in the family, people, I know millennials that are very much into what they call Gothic or Gothic revival, even though that's not what a Gothic revival is. But when they think goth, like that word goth, they enjoy collecting things like poison bottles from the early 1900s. So the desirability of any object is always going to increase its value. This, you'll see a lot of these online, right? This is a bicentennial. Let's see if I can show you a little bit better. I don't have a lot of room here. See how it says Liberty up here? It actually has a year right here, 1776. It shows the Liberty Bell with the crack. It's got those stars at the bottom. Tons of helpful markings down here. See this? This is a syrup bottle, and it says it right on it. What is it? It's log cabin syrup. So it's a beautiful bottle. I've seen people pay way too much for these, and I've also seen them go for not enough. They're not without value when it is the actual authentic item like this. They do have value. They are not worth, however, $40 to $50 each, that sort of a thing. You're looking more in the $20, $18 to $30 price range for a piece like that. Maybe a little bit more if someone's taken the time to collect 4, and you're saying using them in a display, in a cabin, in Tahoe, then you're going to be willing to pay a little bit more for that set, that collection that's already been put together, that you're then, say, I don't know, using against a decorative headboard piece or something like that. So again, something to consider. I don't want to get into perfume bottles in this video because this video is getting way too long already. I'll have to do another video for just perfume bottles. But when you're looking at bottles in general, look for painter's tops. Painter's tops tend to be worth more. You can look up a picture of what that means online. It's just, not a screw top and not a one cork ridge, but a painter's top can be worth a little bit more. An Alpine bottle, a good Alpine bottle, a good, a French scent or perfume bottle. So right here, let's point this guy out. We actually sourced this from someone who did not know what it was at all. And this is the way they had it and had always had it, and they said their parents had it. Now, this top does not go with this bottle. That's something to look for. See how this top is screwed? See how it has screws on here as if to hold on to something or to hold something onto itself? This is actually a decanter top. And if you notice too, see the beautiful little molded glass spiral forms here? Where do you see that reflected in this bottle? Nowhere, right? They don't seem like similar things. It doesn't fit well. It doesn't stay on there very well. And it's not made for this use. It's not a perfume, elongated perfume dipping rod of this glass, right? This just doesn't make sense in this bottle. And when you're looking at pieces, always look at the lids. Always make sure the lids fit correctly, or you shouldn't be paying for an object where you're assuming that this is a full, complete object. Just don't pay that price. Still, of course, buy it if you like it. It's still going to have value. But buy it as if it is an untopped, unlidded bottle and an unbottled top, because that is what's going on here. This is a decanter top. This would have originally had a cork that was affixed, which is why you see these little screws here. It held a cork in place and then would have been used like this, possibly with liquor, definitely with something with probably a high level of alcohol in it. Maybe again, like a French perfume, you'll see that a lot. This one looks more like an Alpine bottle. So it could be as old as 1890. And again, that's sort of an industry thing. You could go and look it up. Sometimes this one I don't think actually is, because it doesn't have the 4 forms. See how it just has 3 points down here, 3 little rounds, instead of that quadrifoil 4 that comes out. But still, beautiful form. Things like this, the form of a piece is going to increase value. It can also help you date age. This was most likely a perfume bottle. I would say a very late 1800s or early 1900s perfume bottle. You would have had some sort of a paper logo or information affixed here when it was originally sold, very likely. But all these little curves, it's so well made. Again, no seams anywhere. Beautiful little cork top here. Wonderful things to look for. Look for painter's tops. Here, I see pieces like this. I'm trying to think of everything I can tell you within maybe half an hour or less. I see this called all the time online like an ink bottle or an apothecary bottle. It isn't. This is a French scent bottle. And you can tell that because of this oblong shape. This kind of design and form came into trend. See that? It makes you think perfume, right? It makes you think maybe scent. Maybe something was in here. And this is a good example too. Distracting myself. But see how that seam does ride over this lip? It comes up on both sides all the way over. See that little tiny line right there where my finger's moving? That's that seam. And it's actually coming all the way up and over the lip. That's an important thing to know about. So in the industry, we use the term ABM when we're talking about glass bottles and how they're made. ABM means automatic bottle machine. So an automatic bottle machine piece is a little bit of controversy whether they really started using it in 1903 or 1914, but they have this what's called the ABM seam, which runs all the way around a piece and up over the lip. So even though I said it was French, I'm now thinking this might be American made, honestly. Again, could be a scent piece, most likely a scent piece, but maybe an American scent, because it has that ABM running all the way up over the lip of the bottle. And when you look at bottles too, another thing historically, if you're trying to work out, when it has a smooth bottom, totally smooth, so no curve, no pontille, and maybe no impression marks, no logos, no writing there, no company manufacturer stamp, anything like that. When you're seeing that sort of smooth bottom, you're thinking 1865 to 1917. If you're trying to find more information, if you're researching something, if you're wondering what the piece in your collection is from or was doing when it was made. About the Civil War to World War I, that's kind of how we come up with that range of dates. Odd colors with bottles are worth more. So, clear is always great, but worth a little less. Colors tend to be worth more. Aged items tend to be worth more. Good condition tends to be worth more. You can look into whether it's a pontil, as I was talking before, when it's a handmade piece on a rod. Is it an open pontil, which is 1600s to 1800s, or is it an iron pontil mark on the bottom of the glass? And there you're looking more like 1840 to 1865. And of course, there's a confusing gap in the center of those numbers where you're trying to feel things out. And that's something you can look into. You can go online and you can look at open pontil marks versus iron pontil marks and get a feel for that. That can help you date a glass bottle. Lower values, generally clear glass, amber glass, aqua glass. Worth more, generally, black, desirable. Teal blues, greens, any kind of green glass, olive glass, milk glass when it comes to glass bottles. High values. So when you're then tending to look more into colored glasses, purple glasses, Vaseline glasses, what's known as yellow green, sometimes called lime, very bright, pretty rare to find. Cobalt blue instead of, lesser blues or teals or aquas. Those are all higher evaluation colors generally. Again, it's not a rule you can apply across the board, but generally that's true. When you're collecting for yourself, you want and wondering, will this accrue more value over time as well? Is it worth what I'm paying now at retail? Because it should be worth what you're paying. And is it likely to accrue more value? When you're a collector, you want to think about design. So beautiful forms. Beautiful forms are more attractive than, straight forms generally. So design, appeal. Does it say poison on it? Because that's appealing to some people. Maybe it's a Jack Daniels piece and liquor pieces that are collectible Jack Daniels happen to be doing well. That could add appeal for someone who only collects Jack Daniels pieces. So design, the form of the object, the appeal of the object. How pretty is it? How much do you want to look at it? If you really want to look at it, it's more appealing, and it's likely that other people would find it appealing as well. Rarity. And that plays into what was it used for? What color is it? Are there others that come onto the market? Rarity can increase value, and demand. What is everybody going after, when, and why? And a lot of these glass bottles hold their values very well and do increase moving forward. But those are what the things you want to be looking for. Certain logos can add appeal and demand. So say Pepsi, a glass Pepsi bottle from a certain year. Now the logo is adding appeal to the object for other reasons because it's falling into other criteria of collectibles. It's now also a Pepsi collectible, but it could also increase the demand, which can increase the value because now 4 people want it instead of 2 people wanting it that day. Things to think about. I'm just trying to go over as much as I can, like all of these basics. I kind of don't want to get into the perfumes, as I said before. I've talked about these a little bit. I've talked about those. When we're looking at blues, there are different shades of blue, right? Darker cobalts worth more. Lighter pieces sometimes worth, a little less. I will say that recently I've seen, personally, an increase in people looking for ink bottles, especially vintage ink bottles. So very much like I was saying, there are a lot of collectors who enjoy collecting apothecary pieces with medicine marks or drugstore pieces with poison marks where it will literally say poison right inside the molding of the stamp. There's also recently, it seems, a lot of people looking for those old square form ink bottles or very old round form ink bottles. Ink bottles seem to be trending up currently collectively. So again, demand increases value. If people stop collecting ink bottles within, say 20 years from now, maybe the poison bottles will keep increasing and the demand for the ink bottles will level out and it'll become a demand for something like hair tonic bottles. I don't know. But that's all something to be aware of when you're collecting your items. I have generally seen poison does well, apothecary medicine bottles do well, ink bottles do well. Anything with a painter's top does well. Sometimes bicentennial pieces like that brown one I was showing you, but not always. They'll hold where they are generally, but I haven't seen them go up very much. Screw top, not as old as cork. I think I mentioned that already. It's kind of, look for the curve in the bottom, look at the color, look at the condition. And I'll have to do a whole nother video on perfumes later because I'm running out of time. It's going to take too much memory to load this video. So I hope that it's helpful a little bit. And I'm going to get right on making another video for everyone. Cheers.